Shemot or Exodus 32. And I am going to start us off by reading verses 1 through 6. And it reads, "And when the people saw that Moshe delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aharon and said unto him, Up, make us Elohim, which shall go before us. For as for this Moshe, the man that brought us up out of the land of Mitzrayim, we wot not what has become of him. And Aharon said unto them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. And all the people brake off the golden earrings which were in their ears, and brought them unto Aharon. And he received them at their hand, and fashioned it with a graving tool, after he had made it a molten calf. And they said, These be thy Elohim, O Yasharel, which brought thee up out of the land of Mitzrayim. And when Aharon saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aharon made proclamation and said, Tomorrow is a feast to Yahuwah. And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. There is a lot going on in these first 6 verses. In the previous lesson, Ransom of Souls, Moshe was nearing and ending his 40 days on the mount with Yahuwah. The last instruction that Yahuwah gave Moshe to give to the children of Yasharel was about honoring the Shabbat, one of the most important instructions that we have. Now, remember in the last chapter, Yahuwah said, Speak thou also unto the children of Yasharel, saying, Verily, my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am Yahuwah that doth sanctify you. Now, there are a lot of oaths or signs that Yahuwah gives us so that we understand who he is. But this commandment to honor the Shabbat is one in which, if we keep it as he has prescribed, it is a sign to Yahuwah of who we are. It shows our obedience, our love, and ultimately that we are relinquishing our will to do his will. Let's look at Isaiah, and we're going to read 29, 13, and 14. It says, Wherefore Yahuwah said, For as much as this people draw near me with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. Now, if you do a careful reading of the first 6 verses in Exodus chapter 32, you will come to the realization that Yahuwah is instructing Moshe concerning the Shabbat, or you will come to the realization that as Yahuwah is instructing Moshe concerning the Shabbat, it is quite possible that at the same time, the people are pressing Aharon to make for them deities to go before them. But they also make a proclamation that gives us a little insight into their mindset, because they say, As for this Moshe, the man that brought us up out of the land of Mitzrayim, we wot not what has become of him. They are speaking of Moshe almost as if he's a stranger. This Moshe, the man that brought us up, which is also my next point. I am pretty sure that we can agree that Yahuwah brought them up out of the land by a strong hand. And one may say that perhaps they see it this way because Moshe is speaking to them in Exodus 12:17 when he says, "And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in this selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Mitzrayim. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generation by ordinance forever." But even this doesn't make a ton of sense because in Exodus 13, verse 3, Moshe reminds them that remember this day in which he came out of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand, Yahuwah brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. Now, they go on from here to witness several instances where Yahuwah intervenes on their behalf. You have the parting of the sea, the sweetening of the waters at Meribah, the giving of the manna, and etc. And this reminds me of our people even unto this day. And let it be a witness to you that we continue to do everything in our power to deny the existence and the authority of Yahuwah in our lives. Just as we are seeing here in Exodus 32, we will turn over that authority to ourselves, to others, even unto one of our own to whom we will thrust into a position of authority. Perhaps that is a way for us to reconcile within ourselves the giving away of that authority to someone else, the sin nature that's inside of us. Now, I was looking at this chapter probably about a year ago when I discovered something else in this first verse. Let us look at something that was told to Moshe when they first arrived at Sinai and was preparing for Yahuwah to meet with them. And we're going to look at Exodus 19, verse 12, and it says, "And thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourselves that ye go not up into the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever toucheth the mount shall surely be put to death." Yahuwah reiterates this command in verse 21, where he tells Moshe to charge the people lest they break through unto Yahuwah to gaze, and many of them perish. And Moshe responds in verses 23 to 25, where he says, "The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for thou chargest us, saying, Set bounds about the mount and sanctify it. And Yahuwah said unto him, Away, get thee down, and you shall come up, you and Aharon with thee. But let not the priest and the people break through to come up unto Yahuwah, lest he break forth upon them. So Moshe went down unto the people and spake unto them." Now, Yahuwah, he descends upon the mount with smoke and thunderings and lightnings. And after the giving of the Ten Commandments in chapter 20, the people, they remove and they stand afar off. And they say to Moshe in verse 19, "Speak you with us, and we will hear. But let not Elohim speak with us, lest we die." And Moshe said unto the people, "Fear not, for Elohim is come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not." And the response from the people was to remain afar off. And Moshe draws near unto the thick darkness. So we see that the people have been instructed to not come up the mount, nor touch it, lest they die. Yahuwah descends upon the mount and speaks to them the Ten Commandments. And because of fear, they remove themselves far off. And in essence, they refuse to communicate with Yahuwah, opting instead to have Moshe speak with them instead of Yahuwah. Now, Fear, in most instances, will cause a person to do one of two things. They either overcome and draw nearer to the one or the thing that they fear, or they give into it and avoid the one or the thing that they fear. Let's look at 2 Timothy 1, verses 7 and 8. And it says, "For Elohim hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Be not thou therefore ashamed of the testimony of our master, nor of me as prisoner, but be thou partaker of the afflictions of the gospel, according to the power of Elohim." Now, according to verse 7, Elohim does not give the spirit of fear to us. And according to verse 8, fear causes you to be ashamed of the gospel, of the testimony of the master, and not to partake in the afflictions of the gospel, which is ordained or according to the power of Elohim. Now, the word testimony here, it is martyrium, and it means a testimony of evidence, even evidence given, but especially the 10 Commandments. This that we're reading here, the latter portion, it's very much akin to what we call the flee doctrine, attempting to avoid the affliction you are experiencing by fleeing to somewhere else. If we read a little further in 2 Timothy, we find in verse 9 that it says, "Who have redeemed or saved us and called us with a Kodesh calling, not according to our works, but according to his own purpose and esteem, which was given us in Mashiach Yahusha before the world began." Now, if you have been with me for a while in the 6-day study, you will remember that I showed that the ark itself, by the meanings of the materials used in its construction, is a representation of the blessings and the curses. Let's look real quick at Exodus 25, verses 14 through 16, and it says, "And thou shalt put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark, that the ark may be borne with them." Now, staves here, it means sticks. And ironically, there's 2 sticks here. "And they shall be put into the rings by the sides of the ark, which are in the 4 corners of the ark, that the ark may be borne with them," or lifted up, is what borne means. "The staves or sticks, they shall be in the rings of the ark, which are in the 4 corners, and they shall not be taken from it." And then verse 16 says, "And thou shalt put into the ark the testimony which I shall give you." Testimony, 10 Commandments. Back to Exodus 20. After the children of Israel flee from the voice of Yahuwah in Exodus 20, and Moshe draws near unto Yahuwah, the conversation between Yahuwah and Moshe, it continues all the way until chapter 24. And here, Yahuwah instructs Moshe to have himself, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the elders come up the mount and worship afar off. In verse 2, Moshe shall come near to Yahuwah only, and they shall not come nigh. Moshe instructs the people the words of Yahuwah. He builds 12 pillars, and he offers sacrifices. He reads the covenant, and the people respond, all that Yahuwah have said we will do, and be obedient. He then sprinkles the blood on them, and Moshe then ascends the mount with Aharon, Nadab, Abihu, and the 70 elders, where they see Elohim and they eat and drink. In verse 12, Yahuwah then instructs Moshe to come up, and Moshe rises up with Yahushua, his minister, to go further up into the mount of Elohim. But before he does, he instructs the others in verse 14, and it says, and he said unto the elders, tarry ye here for us until we come again unto you. And behold, Aharon and Hur are with you. If any man have any matters to do, let him come unto them. So Moshe here instructs Aharon, Nadab, Abihu, the 70 elders, to which we find out that Hur is one of them, to remain there until he and Yahushua come again unto them. Now, mind you, they are on the mount, but not all the way up where Moshe will be with Yahuwah. Yahushua will escort Moshe a ways up, but not all the way. So here's what we have thus far. We have an initial instruction for the people to not come near nor touch the mount. We have an exception made for Aharon, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 elders to come into the mount, but to remain at a specific point on the mount until Moshe and Yahushua return. Now, Moshe goes further into the mount, and there he remains with Yah for 40 days and 40 nights. And this brings us back to the end of the 40 days and the beginning of chapter 32. And also, my question. The text in verse 1 says, the people gathered themselves together unto Aharon and said unto him, make us deities, or make us Elohim. This leaves us with three possible scenarios. Either the people disobeyed and came up the mount to Aharon, or Aharon disobeyed and descended the mount unto the people. Or the third option, the people being spoken of are the elders who are there with Aharon. What do you think? And you don't have to answer that. I personally believe it is option number 3, the elders. Now, we know that all of them, including Aharon, Nadab, and Abihu, are males. Stephen, when he's given his discourse in Acts 7, refers to them several times as our fathers. The usage of fathers in this way denotes reverence or respect, and is often in reverence to one's elder. Lastly, in verse 2 of chapter 32, Aaron instructs them to break off the earrings of their wives, sons, and daughters. This statement of wives, sons, and daughters can technically be seen as all of Yasharel, to which the conversation would have to have been with the elders, who are commonly called to make decisions for the entirety of Yasharel. The golden earrings that are collected from Yasharel, they will be used by Aharon to fashion the molten calf. The collection and the utilization of earrings, it can be seen throughout Scripture, and it is often portrayed as the initial catalyst of something that will be created for a purpose that is less than righteous. We see this with Gideon creating an ephod that the children of Yasharel went a-whoring after, and it became a snare to all of Yasharel and unto the house of Gideon. Yaakov, before entering Bethel, stopped at Shechem and ordered all of his household to put away the strange deities among them. And he collected the teraphim and their earrings and buried them under the oak, which is by Shechem. Think about that. It says Jacob spoke this unto his household. Think of all the things that Jacob went through when he fled Laban. All the while his household was in possession of strange deities. Now, the earrings themselves are not inherently evil. What it is that the earrings can be seen as one's intended allegiance to the one who has bestowed them upon them. It can oftentimes also breed within oneself a sense of vanity, which can cause one to go astray. Now, Eliezer, when sent to find a wife for Yitzhak, bestowed upon Rebekah earrings. This was seen by Laban as her intended agreement to a marriage covenant with Isaac. And in Ezekiel, Yahuwah is speaking to the prophet, and he says to Israel in Ezekiel 16, 12 through 14, he says, I put a jewel on thy forehead, and earrings in thy ears, and a beautiful crown upon thine head. Thou wast decked with gold and silver, and thy raiment was of fine linen and silk, embroidered work. And thou didst eat fine flour and honey and oil. And thou was exceedingly beautiful, and thou didst prosper into a kingdom. And thy renown went forth among the heathen for thy beauty, for it was perfect through my comeliness, which I put upon thee, saith Yahuwah Elohim. But thou didst trust in thy own beauty, and played the harlot because of thy renown, and pourest out thy fornications on every one that passed by. And of thy garments thou didst take, and deckest thy high places with divers colors, and played the harlot thereupon. The like thing shall not come, neither shall it be so. Thou hast also taken thy fair jewels of my gold and of my silver, which I have given thee, and madest to thyself images of men, and didst commit whoredom with them. I asked myself about Exodus 32, why did Aaron utter and do this thing with the earrings, fashioning them into a calf? And I am reminded that the elders pressed this thing upon Aaron. And this leads me to believe that Aaron, at this moment, was weak in his judgment and his leadership. Anyone who has been ordained or taken on the title of a leader is expected to love Yahuwah all of the time. This means he is to do the will of Yahuwah all of the time. He has to be above board all of the time. He has to pray when others don't, give alms when others won't, and fast when others cannot. Often the ones who are under the authority of a leader, they can be like water. They will, if allowed, take the path of least resistance. If a leader bends on anything, even the small things, this can cause the ones under the leader's authority to err greatly, which can lead to errors of enormous proportions, just like we will see with Aaron. A strong leader acts as a covering for his entire house or those under his authority. Any errors committed under his authority, as long as he is acting righteously, they can become teaching points in which the entire house can grow. But if the leader of the house is weak or acting in a less than righteous manner, the errors committed under his authority becomes laid to the charge of those that committed them and to the leader's charge as well. Let's look at Jeremiah 17:10. It says, I, Yahuwah, search the heart, I try the reins, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. There is a heart issue related to what we are reading in Exodus 32 as it pertains to Aharon and the elders. Now, many of you in this study may not have been fellowshipping with Goshen Group when I did a study titled An Idle Mind. By the way, Toda Rabbah for all of you that support the work that Goshen Group does for the kingdom by joining us in these studies. In that study, An Idle Mind, it focused on the activities primarily of Leah and Rachel. And allow me to show you something that Yahuwah allowed me to see in that study. It will also bring to light what we read earlier about Yaakov speaking to his household, and also a portion of what we are seeing here with Aharon and the elders. So let's go to Genesis 29. And I'm going to paraphrase some of it. In Genesis 29, Yaakov, he is fleeing from the wrath of his brother Esau. And he journeys back across, think about that, the rivers Euphrates to Haran, where his uncle Laban lives. He happens upon shepherds at the well and inquires of his uncle, and behold, Rachel is coming to the well with her father's sheep. Yaakov becomes smitten by Rachel and agrees to serve his uncle 7 years to make her his wife. Once his days were fulfilled, Laban throws a feast for the occasion, and in the evening, instead, he brings Leah unto Jacob in place of Rachel. His excuse is that it must not be done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee also for the service which thou shalt serve me yet 7 other years. Now, this marrying off of the older before the younger, it is indeed a tradition in Middle Eastern cultures, but it is not a mandatory practice amongst Hebrews. But it does serve to remind us that Yaakov has crossed back over into a place that his ancestors once crossed over from. Now, Yaakov, he fills the additional 7 years for Rachel, and as it would be, he loves Rachel more than Leah. And in verse 31, we are told, Leah, and when Yahuwah saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Now, this next portion, I'm going to need for you all to answer me in the chat as I go through it. Now, Leah, she ends up conceiving and bearing a son whom she called Reuben. And in verse 32, who does she say looked upon her affliction? Hallelujah. Yahuwah. In verse 33, she bears Simeon, and who does she say heard that she was hated? Hallelujah. Yah. Okay, then she bears Levi, conceives again, and bears Yehuda. Who does she say will now praise, or she will now praise? Hallelujah. Yah. Toda. In chapter 30, Rachel envies her sister because she realizes that she has bore Yaakov no children. She implores Yaakov to give her children or else she will die. Yaakov's anger is kindled against Rachel, and whose stead does he ask her is he in? Elohim. This is important. Elohim is a title in which the implication of its usage is determined by the thought and context in which it is being used. The Strong's, it always shows Elohim as being spelled with a lowercase e, even in instances where its usage is clearly being directed at or for Yahuwah. So it is important to find out the thoughts and the context of the person using the term. When Rachel's handmaid bears a son for Rachel's stead in verses 5 and 6, she says, Elohim have judged me. Now, at first glance, this may appear to be trivial because Leah later on in the text attributes future conceptions to Elohim as well. Even Rachel, when she finally bears Joseph a son, says that Elohim has hearkened to her and Elohim has taken away her reproach. And then she adds that Yahuwah shall add to her another son. Now, in chapter 31, Yaakov makes a plan to flee from Laban. Leah and Rachel are concerned that they will have no portion or inheritance in their father's house, which that's a telling statement. And Rachel ends up stealing her father's teraphim. There we go, which means family idol. And they and Jacob flee. Now, Laban, he catches up to them in Gilead. And then in verse 29 and 30, he says, it is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. But the Elohim of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not unto Yaakov either good or bad. And now thou wouldest need be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house. Yet wherefore hast thou stolen my Elohim? Now, notice the difference he puts on the Elohim of Yaakov's father and his Elohim that have been stolen. Yaakov and Laban, they end up making a covenant that they shall not pass a heap and a pillar of witness to each other. And in verse 53, Laban swears to the covenant by the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Nahor, and the Elohim of their father. Now, Abraham and Nahor were brothers, and their father was Terah. So here is the question. Who was Terah's Elohim? And you don't have to answer that one. Let's just look at Joshua 24, verse 2. It says, and Yahushua said unto all the people, thus saith Yahuwah Elohim of Yasharel, your fathers dwelt on the other side of the flood in old time, even Terah, the father of Abraham and the father of Nahor, and they served other Elohim. So back in Genesis, who is Laban swearing this oath by? Do you think Yaakov understood what Laban was saying? Because it says in the text, Yaakov swore by the fear of his father, Yitzhak. And this is to say that Yaakov swore by the one whom his father feared. Now, believe it or not, Yaakov was having a hard time understanding and maintaining his faith in Yahuwah since the moment he set foot in Haran. And perhaps this was exacerbated by his love for Rachel. Think lust of the flesh and lust of the eyes. If you think about it, he was deceived and hunted by Laban. He then encountered and was fearful of his brother Esau, who the last time we checked, he wanted to kill him. He ends up fighting and wrestling with a man at Penuel. Dinah gets violated by Shechem, and his sons end up killing all the males at Shechem. It is not until Yaakov reaches Bethel, and in chapter 35, Yahuwah instructs him to make an altar there, and Yaakov begins to take a turn for the better. And this is where he instructs all of his household to give up their earrings and their strange Elohim, and he buries them under the oak by Shechem. But as is the case for us and so many of our people, sometimes leaving the old stuff behind and relinquishing our will unto Yahuwah and doing his will is something that we tend to refuse to do in our hearts. You see, when Rachel bore Yosef, she exclaimed that Yahuwah would add unto her another son. And indeed he did. She is now in labor, and it appears to be an extremely difficult one that will cause her to lose her life. But before she dies, she attempts to name this son Benoni. But Yaakov is having none of that and names him Benjamin, which is to say, son of my right hand, or son of my strength. Now, the Strong says that Benoni means son of my sorrow. But if we look closer, we can find that Oni or Onai is a derivative of the word avon, which means nothingness, trouble, vanity, wickedness, and idol. It shows us that Rachel was still holding on to her idolatrous ways, still holding on to the things she held dear on the other side. And we find this same type of pattern in the beginning of Exodus 32. In verse 1, the elders press Aharon, requesting that he make them Elohim, which shall go before them. And in verse 4, Aharon fashions it, and they, the elders, proclaim, "These be thy Elohim, O Yasharel, which brought thee up out of the land of Mitzrayim." And in my opinion, this statement has got to be the final straw for Yahuwah. Let's look real quick at Romans 1, 21 through 25. It says, "Because that when they knew Elohim, they esteemed him not as Elohim, neither were they thankful. But they became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and they changed the glory or the esteem of the uncorruptible Elohim into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Wherefore Elohim also gave them up to uncleanliness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of Elohim into a lie, and worship and serve the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen." Now, Aaron, he has no response to the elder's statement. Instead, he builds an altar before the molten calf, which was another poor act of a poor judgment act. And he makes a proclamation that tomorrow is a feast to Yahuwah. At least he got the name right, I suppose. Even though Aharon has the heart to serve Yahuwah, he at this point lacks the courage and the resolve to stand firm in it in the face of adversity. This lapse in judgment will not be forgotten by Yahuwah. Now, a few things that I've learned about leaders in my short time on earth. One is that the missteps of a leader often has grave consequences for those under his authority. Remember, last lesson we talked about Dawid numbering the people and how 70,000 men of Yasharel died because of it. The other thing I've learned or noticed is that calamities or misfortunes of others are often not an indictment against the person or people they affect. A lot of times, these things are happening to serve as a warning or a lesson to someone close to or around the person or people being affected. I remember being in Navy boot camp, and on several occasions, our unit leader or someone would make a mistake. The consequence of that mistake was that our company commander would allow the unit leader, or the one who made the mistake, to go and get a candy bar and a soda, both of which are not allowed in boot camp. He would then sit them in front of the entire unit and have them eat and drink while the company commander would exercise the entire unit until, as he put it, we could make the walls sweat. After Aaron's proclamation of tomorrow being a feast, we find in verse 6 that the people rose up early on the morrow, offered sacrifices, ate, drank, and rose up to play. And you know, Yahuwah rightly labeled them as a stubborn and a stiff-necked people. Remember, Samuel told Saul that rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry, all exhibited here with the elders of Yasharal. And I leave you with one last verse or one last reading. 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 14. It says, "Moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant, how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moshe in the cloud and in the sea, and did eat all the same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Mashiach. But with many of them, Elohim was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things were our examples, to the intent we should not lust after evil things, as they also lusted. Neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drank and rose up to play. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. Neither let us tempt Mashiach, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed of serpents. Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured, and were destroyed of the destroyer. Now all these things happen unto them for ensamples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. There have no temptation taken you but such as is common to man. But Elohim is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. Wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry."